Imagine being forced to make a moral choice, not because you believe it's right, but because the world is watching. In Shooting an Elephant, written by George Orwell in 1936, a British officer in the colonial Burma faces exactly that dilemma. He's trapped between his conscience and the expectations of an entire crowd. I'm Hannah Kanji, and in this presentation, I'll explore how Orwell's story reflects ideas we've studied in this English course. From literary theories to poetry, short stories, and The Wars by Timothy Finley, each part of Orwell's experience connects back to one central idea that power and morality are always at odds, and guilt becomes the price of obedience. So, before we analyze what Orwell's really saying, let's quickly take a look at what happens in the story itself. Orwell begins by describing his position as a British officer in Burma, someone who represents authority but secretly hates the empire he serves. When an elephant escapes, destroys property, and even kills a man, the villagers expect him to act. But when he finally finds the elephant, it's calm and peaceful. Still, thousands of people are watching, waiting for him to prove his strength. Orwell doesn't want to shoot the elephant, but the pressure to appear powerful outweighs his own conscience. When he finally pulls the trigger, the elephant collapses in pain, and Orwell realizes he didn't do it out of duty, but out of fear of humiliation. That single moment becomes a symbol of how power traps everyone, not just the oppressed, but those who enforce it. And it's in that moment, surrounded by the crowd, that we see Orwell's real struggle begin. When the crowd gathers behind him, Orwell says, "I had got to shoot the elephant." It's not a statement of confidence, it's pure pressure. Through a psychological lens, you can see how his two identities split. One knows it's wrong, and the other feels forced to act strong because everyone is watching. It mirrors Robert Ross in The Wars. Robert also acts out of duty and fear of judgment. Both men are caught between what's moral and what's expected. From a sociological lens, the crowd represents conformity, the way people lose themselves in collective pressure. In Orwell's case, that pressure pushes him to destroy the very innocence he wants to protect. And when he finally fires a shot, everything he's been trying to suppress comes crashing down. When Orwell pulls the trigger, he describes the elephant's death in slow, excruciating detail. Its breathing, its collapse, and endless waiting. The writing feels almost poetic. The rhythm mirrors hesitation, and the imagery makes his guilt feel physical. The elephant, strong yet gentle, becomes a symbol of Orwell's own lost innocence. Ironically, by trying to appear powerful, he exposes his weakness. It's the same kind of irony that Wilfred Owen uses in Dulce et Decorum Est, where the glory of war turns into horror. He plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. Both Orwell and Owen strip away false ideals, one about heroism and the other about authority. Through a moral lens, Orwell's guilt becomes the heart of the essay. He obeys the system, but betrays himself. That guilt doesn't fade after the shot. It follows him, and that's where the real essay reflection begins. Afterwards, Orwell admits, "I had done it solely to avoid looking a fool." That single line reveals everything. He acted out of fear, not conviction. Through a Marxist lens, this shows how imperialism corrupts both sides. The colonized lose freedom, but the colonizer loses morality. He's supposed to symbolize control, but instead, he's just another cog in the empire system. In The Wars, Robert Ross faces a similar loss of agency. When Finley writes that Robert wanted to go back and put out the fire, but he couldn't move, it's the same paralysis Orwell feels, frozen by the weight of expectation. And in Stephen King's Why We Crave Horror Movies, King says we all keep the gators fed, meaning we all face our darker instincts. Orwell does exactly that. It exposes the darker part of humanity that power brings out. But not every writer gives into that darkness. Some rise above it. Wilfred Owen and Maya Angelou show two sides of human response to oppression. In Owen's Dulce Decorum Est, he exposes the horror behind patriotic lies. He plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. Orwell's writing does something similar with Empire. He shows the raw inside authority, how power destroys both victim and enforcer. But in Maya Angelou's Still I Rise, the tone completely shifts. Where Orwell collapses under pressure, Angelou rises above it. She says, "You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I rise." Both using repetition, Orwell's to show guilt, Angelou's to show resilience, proving that power can either crush or strengthen the human spirit. Both writers force us to question what true strength really means, whether it's found in dominating others or in surviving with your humanity intact. And maybe that's the heart of both works, the idea that real power doesn't come from control, but from courage, endurance, and self-respect. That same question, strength versus morality, runs through the wars and even The Coward. In the wars, Robert Ross learns that obedience without compassion destroys the self. When he defies orders to save the horses, he fired the pistol 3 times. The horses plunged and fell. It's a brutal but merciful act. He kills out of love, not fear. That moment directly contrasts Orwell's. Both men pull a trigger, but for opposite reasons. In the short film The Coward, the same question appears. Is courage found in violence or restraint? Through a psychological lens, guilt becomes a measure of conscience. Orwell's guilt comes from conformity, while Ross's comes from compassion. Both remind us that true courage isn't about dominance. It's about empathy and moral clarity. And all of these works, across genres and voices, return to one central truth. Across everything we studied, Orwell's essay, Owen's poetry, Angelou's resilience, Finley's war, and King's reflections, one truth stands out. Power tests the human soul. Whether it's Orwell's guilt, Owen's horror, or Angelou's defiance, each writer reveals what happens when conscience collides with control. Orwell ends his essay realizing that when the white man turns tyrant, it is his own freedom that he destroys. His act wasn't power, it was surrender. That same idea runs through the wars, Dulce Decorum Est, and Still I Rise. That strength without compassion isn't power at all. It's actually failure. And that's what makes Shooting an Elephant timeless. It forces us to ask what we become when we stop listening to conscience. Thank you for listening to my presentation.